بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وآل محمد صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wal ikram.
How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah.
Okay, so I can hear my voice really loud.
Oh, sorry, let me put my bad, sorry. Yes. Good now?
Okay, so we're live on Instagram, we're good, but I don't see the YouTube and the Facebook. So just give me a moment while I figure out what's going on. And we'll just wait for people to join in. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Just give us a few seconds while we see what's going on here.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly. Okay, and we are live. I see it on Facebook, although it tells me here that it's offline, so I'm not sure where. Let me check on YouTube as well. Yeah, so, okay, we're good in all places. Just make sure the sound is working in all places. Yeah. We're good. Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum officially, everybody. Thank you for joining us. And what are we? What day are we now? I think around day 8 in Ramadan, day 8, 9 in Ottawa, Canada. I'm not sure your parts of the world. Day before or day behind. Shahr Ramadan Mubarak in any case to everybody. And thank you for joining us this afternoon here in my part of the world, evening in other parts of the world. And thank you so much, Brother Hassan, for joining us on this live today. So we've had several discussions with different people, different backgrounds, and different topics related to something interesting in regards and relevant in regards to Ramadan and the quarantine. And mashallah, everybody has had so much to contribute in terms of their background, their interests. And so this was something that was an interesting topic we thought to explore a little bit in terms of personality or building, and especially for times of hardships that we're going through. This is a first Ramadan in all of our lives, perhaps, that we are experiencing. Excuse me, here we go, it's already starting, alhamdulillah, that we haven't experienced before, perhaps in our lifetime. So it's been quite challenging in terms of staying at home and not attending majalis and just breaking our iftars and doing communal prayers in our centers. We've had to do a lot of that, of course, in our homes and with our families. So it's been different. And we thought these types of interactions in different mediums would get our friends and family occupied in a healthy way, right? And challenging themselves with different thoughts and ideas, and perhaps learning and even contributing. So inshallah, during the live today, we have some questions set up already by audiences that have sent them in ahead of time. And you're more than welcome to join in, inshallah, and send in your questions. And may I just emphasize related questions, relevant questions to the topic, because people get excited about other things that they want to discuss. We'll try to keep it to the topic at hand, inshallah. So again, welcome, Brother Hassan. So Brother Hassan is Al Qadri. He is an Islamic lecturer based out of London, UK, and he's had a passion for studying Islam for a long time. And I'm going to get him to talk more about his background and his interest, his background, educational background, and his interest in this topic, inshallah. Welcome, Brother Hassan.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Assalamu alaikum to everyone. Basically, my educational background, I've always had an interest from a young age when it comes to Islamic studies. I've always asked, I was always that young kid when the scholars sitting there, I would ask controversial questions you probably didn't want to answer. And I just wanted to pursue knowledge. So I kind of left somewhat of a career path. I went to, it's a uni, but it's called Islamic College. I don't know if you've heard of it in UK. So I studied there.
Yes.
I studied there for a few years, and then I kind of started to have private lessons with some scholars. and just furthered my studies like that, while maintaining a family and continuing with life. And as you can see, I try to read as much as I can. I have books at home, and I try to study as much as possible, as much as time gives me. And Alhamdulillah, we push forward, and we're here now.
Alhamdulillah. And what would you say is your specific interest in pursuing Islamic studies?
I'll definitely say polemics and history, hadith, aqidah. I think aqidah and hadith probably the most. I find it fascinating the way hadith got to us, and the manner that it got to us, and the different struggles it went through to get to us, and studying the different chains, the words, and how in a different source maybe the word is different. And polemics is always heated, exciting. So yeah, these are the topics I'm more or less interested in.
It's people have this assumption when you study Islamic studies, it's just one specific thing, but it's just like any other studies where in psychology we have different fields and schools of thought, in science as well, medicine, there's so many specializations. So I would assume it's the same thing and within Islamic studies as well.
Yeah, it's I was just talking to someone about it earlier today. It's when it comes to Islamic studies, if you don't study, you can't, you have to try to be somewhat good at every single science to a certain degree, or have a certain understanding. Like that, you kind of build a good foundation. For example, if you're good at, for example, if you don't have an understanding of usul al-fiqh, the principles of jurisprudence, but you're good at, for example, ilm al-rajal, there will be some areas where you won't understand certain things, and how certain things are, how ahkam and ahadith the scholars derive from it, and so on. So it's important to kind of have an overview of all of the sciences of Islam.
Very interesting to have that. And I find in my line of work as a psychotherapist, and especially using Islamic concepts related to psychology, it's as soon as you start, it delves deeper and deeper and deeper. And I've had the opportunity over the years to work with different scholars and sheikhs of different backgrounds, especially when it comes to counseling family issues and matters. And there's always like in terms of sharing cases and helping. And you see the sheikhs also have a bit of knowledge now, especially in recent years, in terms of mental health and counseling and psychology, as they found it so vital in order to be able to help, because you fellas are almost like the frontline workers where people come to you for problems in our centers, in our communities. So it's good to have that skill in terms of family counseling, or just listening skills and basic counseling skills in order to help. And we all work together to support. And I can't tell you how many times I've had clients ask me Islamic questions and said, hold on, let me connect you to somebody who can help you with that. So it's really good in, subhanAllah, the last few years where there has been this shift from speaking about mental health in our communities as something as ayab and taboo and not to get into, but now it's openly spoken on the mambar and the majalis and all these different workshops and lectures that we see around that, including some of the prominent speakers in our community who have really realized how important it is to openly speak about this in order to reach people so they don't feel that they are alone and isolated and at the point of desperation of wanting to harm themselves and give up. And so that specific topic is another idea, but it's just an introduction into talking about well-being, mental health, psychology, Islamic psychology. And I know this is from some of my Hausa friends who said that now this is implemented in some of the houses where they actually have Islamic counseling concepts, which has been in our history for almost 1400 years, yet it's only now that we see this in modern research where they're proving, so to speak, mindfulness practices, and even talking about yoga and all of these practices that we already have something before in terms of, let's say, the salah, the movements of the salah and how it impacts you and how it de-stresses you and so on. So there's so much to talk about that. And it's a bit of an intro to our topic in terms of personality and in terms of how to work on that and build that, especially in difficult times that we're experiencing these days. So we can begin perhaps with just having an idea. Perhaps let's look at it from an Islamic and a psychological perspective. And I'll start with you, brother, in terms of what is personality from an Islamic perspective?
So I think it's To sum it up in a brief manner, it's you are trying to be the reflection of al-insan al-kamil, so the complete human being. So we have a theory. I don't like to call it a theory, but just to be nice, I'll call it a theory, where basically the 14 infallibles are the complete human beings. So what we are trying to be is a reflection of that.
Right.
It's for us to reflect perfection. Now that means having different attributes, which, for example, knowledge, for example, bravery, courage, mercy, kindness, love, but at times maybe even aggressive. Maybe, this is something, what I'm about to say, maybe some will find it hard to digest, but let me emphasize on it, is to be hateful. Now, someone will be like, oh, hold on, Islam, hateful. Our deen is built upon love and hate, as narrated in Al-Kafi Sharif. There's a chapter on it. This needs to be a balance. You need to love justice and hate injustice. You need to love, for example, the human, or no, you need to love, for example, mercy and hate, for example, oppression, right?
Right.
So it's a balance between the two. And what I can say is that we are trying to be, from an Islamic perspective, is a reflection of al-insan al-kamil. And that's why you hear with Abu Fadl Abbas, you see, they say the Kul Qamar Bani Hashim. I knew you was thinking of it. You was thinking Al-Abbas.
Like personality.
Yeah.
Fadl Abbas.
Yeah, so they call him the moon of Bani Hashim. Why? Sheikh al-Sanad, one of the Maraja, he says it's because he is the reflection of al-insan al-kamil. And that's where they derive that he was a ma'soom and so forth, with the opinion of certain scholars, of course. Yeah. So it's a reflection of al-insan al-kamil. Now, I don't want to get into the different attributes because that will take the whole discussion.
Of course, but one in particular that stands out when we see in terms of the traits, the character traits of our beloved Abbas, is the fact courage comes to mind, right? Strength and courage. And so from a psychological perspective, we take a look at that in terms of it takes a look at the variations amongst individuals in a scientific manner. So it aims to show how people are individually different to psychological forces. So it could be nature and nurture, how that impacts us, right? And it's fascinating because it takes a look at our combination of behavior, emotion, motivation, and thought patterns, which define an individual. So I think it's very complementary to the Islamic perspective, because what you described is this, but of course this is devoid of religion because it's such a scientific definition. But I would add to that, because I would add spirituality and religion to it as somebody who does Islamic counseling practices, not secular only, and it makes sense to do that. And I find it fascinating also the nature and the nurture, right? Yeah. And we have an emphasis on that in Islam in terms of having a positive and healthy Islamic environment for our children to grow up in, and how to influence our children that way. So that's also a huge part of when we talk about personality developing, is to have that strong in the household for children to grow up with that. And this is of course exemplified by our beloved Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with his beloved wife, Lady Khadija alayhi salam, and their daughter. And you see that also exemplified in the house of Imam Ali alayhi salam and Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam. Where alayhi salam rather, where you see that's also exemplified in terms of the nurturing of the nature of the Ahlul Bayt that they raised together. And so we can always turn to that as the model in terms of how to develop the personalities of our children based on that. And that's something I think we can all relate to when we talk about our thought patterns, our emotions, character building, and just how we're influenced by our environment. Definitely. What are your thoughts on that?
I think a healthy environment is very important, but at the same time it's important to train yourself for an environment that's completely against you. And I'll say that's why. You see, for example, the early generation of the Shia, they had to go through so much, and I always emphasize on this, is that they emphasized on the matter of the Imams always emphasize with them with completing their attributes, strengthening these different attributes of their personality, so that they are able to get through what they got through. For example, you have a companion of Imam Al Qadri alayhi salam. His name is Muhammad bin Abi Umair. He was taken into the prison of Ben Al Abbas, and they would torture him. They wanted him to identify the names of the Shia in Kufa, and he wouldn't say it. And it says in one of the reports that he got to a stage and he was about to say it, and he heard the voices of one of the Shia telling him, do not say it, one of the companions of the Imam. And he continued. And he got out of prison and continued his work and da'wah towards Ahlul Bayt. But so I think it's important to create an environment that's healthy, but at the same time be ready for an environment that's, you can say that's going to war with you. For example, boxers, professional boxers, what they do is they have camps for like 12 weeks, so about 3 months.
Training, training.
Sorry?
Like training, like boot camp training.
Yeah, boot camp training. Yeah, they would have for like 3 months. And what they do, they would work on their defense, their attack, their defense, their offense, and so on. This is why, to prepare them for that environment that's harsh towards them. Now, it's the same thing here when it comes to life, because sometimes you're going to have to fight, and not physically fight necessarily, but mentally and spiritually and so on, because so many different things are coming your way. So you need to prepare yourself for that. And the Imams alayhim assalam knew the Shia will go through that, and knew they had to complete these different attributes that complete the human being, so that they are able to get through these harsh times. So yes, definitely have a healthy environment, create a healthy environment, but be ready for a harsh environment. What do you think, sister?
And no, I agree with you. I mean, especially as the Shia Muslims, we are constantly targeted. We are constantly attacked and questioned, and both the males and the females in different matters. And a lot of them are untrue and unfounded, but they're based on misconceptions and the wrong information. And I think ignorance, and it comes from hate as well, I would say, right? Yeah. So you have to, and I think just, as Muslims in general, not just Shias, but Muslims in general, especially women who wear the hijab and brothers who go in public dressed as your respected self, we're going to be seen and viewed as
hijab as well.
There you go. So when you're out in public, you are identified as Muslims, and you could be targeted. And we've seen the Islamophobic influences the last few years, especially in the States with the government that they have now. We've seen that in the UK. We have seen things differently in Canada because we do have a supportive government of diversity, alhamdulillah, but it doesn't stop people from doing attacks and killings. And we have seen this. Just last year, the year before, there was a mosque shooting in Quebec where it took the lives of innocent Muslims, and it was based on hate. So there is an environment, excuse me, where we see from the early Islamophobic attacks on the new Muslims and the converts in the early days of Islam. And I was listening to a lecture by Brother Sayyid Hassan Mekki recently where he talked about that, and it reminded me of that. And the correlation was beautiful to today, because you're going to be a Muslim, you're going to be faced with these hardships. Go back to the original role models that we have who have experienced this Islamophobic attack because of their beliefs in the faith. So that draws inspiration and strength for us to look at in terms of the challenges we experience today. Yes, in a modern era, especially through digital technology and the media that we have access to and the mediums, right? So it's a different form of Islamophobic attacks on us. So what does that mean for us? Does this mean that we do not wear hijab? Does it mean that women cannot still do what we're doing, or men going out in public dress the way they Islamically want to? Or does this mean that we stop ourselves? No, it means that we need to work on ourselves, strengthen ourselves, developing our boundaries as well, but also building our self-confidence, building our self-esteem in our identity as Muslims, whether you're a female or a male, right? So this is something I deal a lot with clients, of course, just self-confidence in general, independent of Islam, but those who are Muslim and feel, excuse me, feel as though wearing the hijab or visibly showing their faith could be a problem. So
let me just ask,
go ahead.
Sorry to cut you up.
So
with your job, your job is it to basically make sure to deal with the mental problem, or to build the personality of the person? or is it the two?
I would say it's a mix of both, but I wouldn't say build a personality. I would say working on the tools to help develop part of that personality that would contribute to that. I work with university audiences, right? So that age group, they're still developing their personalities, right? Whether it's the struggles they experience, the challenges in their personal lives, whether it's school, work, they're also developing their personalities to figure out who they are, what they believe in. And it's that tender age in that university, the early, around 18, 19 till around 24, like the first few years of university, that you see that development of personality, especially when they are faced with the different philosophy, right? They're faced with different concepts in their studies, and including faith and religion. And you have a lot of people who come in and say, I don't know what I believe. I don't know what to believe. I'm not sure. And then you have people who are very certain about what they believe in, but have questions because, and I see this with Muslim clients, let's say, who they've grown up in an environment where they are taught certain things and it's inherited. And so they come to the university where, let's say, they do have to understand. And I personally experienced this when I first started university. And I'll quickly reshare the story of there was an English speaker that was coming in from England, actually. And I won't mention his name, but he came from England and he was a
Sunni or Shia?
Sunni brothers. And so when he came to our university, I was just in awe. I'm like, oh, wow, English speakers. First time I hear an English speaker. It's mostly the usual Arab speakers that we have. And I was fascinated, this person, why did he convert to Islam? Now, he gave a great talk on Tawheed and Taqwa, but I found it was missing a lot, meaning as a follower of the Ahlul Bayt, I didn't hear anything about the Ahlul Bayt. So a lot of us went up to the speaker afterwards and were asking questions. And this was still fairly new to me, talking to scholars and educated people from Islamic perspective, because we usually are very separated in our Hussainiyas and you don't get a chance to speak with the scholar. So somebody mentioned to him, well, what do you think about the grandson of the Prophet? And he just went off on him. And I'm standing there, this young, tender-minded, 18, 19-year-old, and hearing somebody, and especially as I identify as a Karbalaiya, Muhabbin Ahl al-Bayt, especially Imam Hussein and Karbala Ashura, all of that. I'm still learning about this, of course, because it was inherited. But I was shocked about what he was saying against the grandson of our beloved Prophet. And what I found even more frustrating was the fact that I didn't know what to say back to him. That shook me. And I know a lot of young people experience these types of crises where you start questioning what you know and don't know. That was a good part of this hardship for me because it helped me develop my personality in terms of seeking knowledge about this a little bit more. So I'm a very determined person and I follow through mostly with what I try to set out to do. So I was very determined to learn more. So then this is where I became introduced to the basic books of Shia Sunni and Muraja'at. Then I was guided, Peshawar Nights. Yeah, so I remember reading those books during that time. That was just the start. And I remember that afternoon walking around the campus very bewildered and sad. And a part of me came to the acceptance of, this is before I read the books, but I came to the acceptance that there's so much more to learn out there, and that's okay. I think a lot of us become overwhelmed that when you start developing your knowledge, it's so much more and it becomes overwhelming. When you come to the acceptance of, you know what, it's okay. It's okay.
We do have a report attributed to Amir al-Mu'mineen. I say attributed because I haven't checked its, authenticity and so forth. But the Imam basically says, he says, half of religion is saying, I do not know. Look at the beauty of it. Because to acquire more knowledge, you need to have that mentality, I don't know. But if you think you know it, you're never going to go and research. You're never going to go and read. That's a lot of
arrogance. That's a lot of arrogance and ego to think like that. And exactly. So just for everybody to understand that we're all on a journey and it's very individual. And part of this journey includes developing our personality, which means understanding our character traits, understanding our thought patterns and our thinking. And I'll jump into a question, which I think is quite relevant here. They're saying, how do we control our anger and improve our akhlaq? Because anger is an emotion and akhlaq is part of our character and behavior. Would you like to go ahead and answer that, brother?
So I think it's one of them things. What is the opposite of anger? Patience, right? So it's to practice and take steps towards patience, is to understand the importance of patience, and to kind of look at the way the prophets and the early generation of the Shia and the Imams alayhim wassalam, how they reacted towards anger, and how they basically kept themselves patient for them not to, as they call it, release the beast. So I would definitely say look into the lives of the prophets, look into the lives of the early generations, and to understand. But definitely one thing that I say, once you experience that something angers you, understand in your head that if it does happen again, now you have the knowledge of experience. This particular thing angers me. So know that next time you go to it, to kind of be patient and work around it. For example, today,
brother, before you go on to that, can you just fix your phone, because someone's saying they can't see you. See the top of your head only. Yeah, bring it down a bit, please. There we go. Is that brother better? Yeah.
So, for example, today I'm feeding my daughter, and she's playing around, throwing everything on the floor. I knew there was inside me, I wanted to get angry, but I didn't, because I've experienced now that this is what she does. You need to be patient. It's going to happen again. And it's kind of just understanding the process of it. And sometimes it's not just about learning about things from the Quran and the Sunnah, but rather sometimes understanding it and learning it from experience, how to deal with it, how to maintain certain elements of your personality and so forth. So yeah, inshallah that answers the question.
Inshallah, can I just add to that? And with my still learning knowledge of Islamic studies, there's a course that I'm taking that I found really fascinating, because it delved into personality and akhlaq and behavior, and it's based on the 40 hadiths of Imam Khomeini. And in one of the chapters, we look at asabiyya, right? And ghadab. And so there's obviously a difference between that prejudice and anger, but there's a whole section in there where it goes step by step how to work through anger. I don't remember at the top of my head, but I do remember that there was a part in that, how to work with that. And a part of from a psychological perspective is awareness. So we start with the awareness of the emotion. So being aware of what triggers your anger, meaning look at your behavior. So for example, you start tensing up your muscles, perhaps your heart starts racing, you start getting more quiet, or you start getting more loud. Notice what's happening with your body. So being very consciously aware, and that yaqda is so important in the first steps of managing your anger. And again, I'm speaking from a psychological point of view, from what we speak with our clients, but I know a lot of it complements the Islamic part as well, in terms of having awareness, yaqda, right? So that would be the first step, is to study and research your anger to know how you respond to it. Also ask people around you, because sometimes you may not be aware that you could just snap like that, right? So you can ask friends and family. So that would be the first step. The second step is you want to try and cool down, right? What does that mean? Well, if you know that your heart starts racing and you physically get tense, what you want to do, because there's also a surge of hormones in your body here in terms of adrenaline as well, which is a happy hormone, but it also gives you that energy, right? So what you want to do is slow down your heart rate, lower your stress levels, because what happens with emotion and anger here is that the part of the brain that manages emotions, the amygdala and the frontal lobe, just flashes like this. And there's no more thinking capacity at this level. What we want to do is lower that, make it calm again, part of your brain, not flashing, lower it down physiologically so that psychologically you can respond in a calm manner. SubhanAllah, how our brain and our bodies interacted and works like that. And again, it complements our Islamic advice in terms of having awareness, slowing down, and we have these hadith that say if you're sitting down or standing up, change that. Go to another room. Physiologically, subhanAllah, what does that mean? That means your body is being distracted, like we're describing here with the amygdala, is when you get up when you're sitting down, or you're sitting down when you're standing up, or you're changing, the body then is forced to change its functions here by focusing on the walking or sitting. And so when you do that type of thing, then you're lowering rather the intensity of what's happening in your brain. Then you can start to calm down, So there's different strategies. There's the breathing, there's the grounding, doing some mindfulness. Sometimes that's not too much when you're in a rage. So what you want to do is get that anger out of your body. Go punch a pillow. That's okay. You can write a letter and tear it up, expressing your emotions, calling a friend, crying. Crying is okay. You're allowed, because what happens when you do cry and that release of emotion, there's so much toxins that are released in that, which is why you feel so good after a good cry. So these are some strategies. And the next part of that, when we talk about it from psychological point of view, is have a discussion with a person only after you've calmed down, right? And then when you talk about the issues that are upsetting you, perhaps not pointing fingers. So you comments are not going to work. You upset me. You did this. You did that. Rather, what you want to do is bring it back to you and say, I became frustrated when I was interrupted, rather than saying you upset me or you ticked me off when you interrupted me. That is not going to be very conducive. It's not going to be a very healthy discussion, right? So being able to take things back and say, expressing me, I sentences rather than you, that goes a long way in kind of calming that situation down, but also expressing your frustration to somebody to work on these issues, and saying things like, you know, I become very upset when we're late for something. Perhaps, you know, you can give me a heads up, or perhaps you can message me when you're going to be late, you know, these kinds of things. This is also, it's a very simple example, but this kind of step by step can go a long way in helping us managing our anger. So how does this improve our akhlaq? Well, it's what the brother is saying in terms of patience, in terms of awareness, and being able to redirect that anger in a healthier way. What do you think, brother?
I think I learned something myself today.
Oh, okay, alhamdulillah. So let's apply that then to your daughter when she's upsetting you with the food. Yeah, to reverse the effect of that. Bless her. So I have a really good question here that says, in this generation, what are the basic traits and characters one should have? What are your thoughts on that?
Ask the question again, please, if that's okay. Sorry.
Sure. In this generation, what are the basic traits and characteristics one should have? It's a pretty general question, so you can interpret it how you see fit.
I think we are living in an era of love and mercy. So there doesn't need to be the harsh side of the personality doesn't need to be shown, I think. I think it's important to understand the generation you are living in, the community you are living in. You might go to another community and you might have to kind of change that personality. I think definitely love and mercy is at the forefront in the generation that we are living in. And I'll say that funny story is actually it's many of the Salafi scholars from Saudi, they were basically giving advice to the du'at in the West to say this is the era of love and mercy. Don't be harsh.
Oh, mashallah, mashallah.
Yeah, so
irony behind that.
And I agree with them.
Started.
I
agree on
with
our
them.
terms. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I agree in the sense that definitely at the forefront it's love and mercy. It's important that we understand the generation we are living in and what is needed for us to be able to kind of interact with people in the correct way. So definitely love and mercy, in my humble opinion. What do you think, sister?
Definitely, that would be our basic core, right? And I would add to that in terms of, especially as a Muslim hijabi, I would talk about confidence as well as a basic trait in terms of being courageous. And when part of the course that I learned that I found fascinating is when you work to purify your anger, it gives you courage. And we need that courage, especially in light of the challenges that we experience. I'm speaking on behalf of Muslim women in hijab out in the public sector, in the government, if we work, in private institutions, just even going outside, you know. Although now in quarantine, it's obviously a bit different. Now we're all walking around like this these days, you know, and I think we all feel safer walking around like this these days than before. Before, when we walked out in our hijab, it was still a little bit concerning how people would look at us covered. Now it's a concern when you're not covered, and I actually feel more comfortable going in like that. Sometimes I walk around without the face covering and I'm like, watching other people covered. And I'm like, look how the tables have turned, and you're looking at me strange when I'm uncovered. So I find courage and self-confidence is really important as Muslim women, to be able to still wear your hijab proudly and not be influenced by the fashion influencers in terms of how to have a lack of modesty. And I'm a big proponent on that. And I may not be popular with some sisters who are all into makeup and hijab publicly. You know, okay, everyone's got their own opinion about that, but I don't believe that morphing and transforming your hijab into a fashion statement and paleting your face like you're going to a makeup gives you confidence. That's false confidence. And I know this from girls who don't wear hijab, by the way, non-Muslims as well, who put on a lot of makeup and wear provocative clothes in a different way to boost up their confidence. But meanwhile, underneath, their confidence is very low. So I say this from, again, a psychological perspective, dealing with clients who, and women in particular, how they exhibit a fake confidence in the way that they dress. And there's so much beauty and strength in our hijab without having to transform it and morph it into the norm of fashion. Mind you, I'm all for fashion. I love fashion. In my younger days, I loved it. And I even was into this fashion hijab thing for a while until it took a turn for the worse, until they started live and Instagramming and all this stuff and runways and music. And then I'm like, what? And makeup? And I'm like, hold on a second. This does not go in line with our values, not our modesty values. In the beginning, it was okay, but it has morphed into something that is just, it just doesn't go. And I find and let me just reiterate something too. It's okay for women to enjoy makeup and fashion clothing, but it depends where you're going to do that, right? If you're doing this out in the public, I'm sorry, sister, and you're going to have your own opinion, and that's fine. But that just goes against our basic modesty. It's not modesty. And I know we're all going to have different interpretations of modesty. However, there's a black and white with that and a little bit of gray. But our gray has gotten bigger over the last few years when it comes to fashion. Brother, you're holding back a laugh here. Let me just continue a little bit longer with this.
Yeah, you know why I'm laughing? It's because I'm glad someone else is shooting the gun and not me. Usually I have hassle for it, so you know.
Well, it's funny you say that. It's interesting that you say that because some of my sheikh brothers have told me, sister, we can't say a thing without being attacked. We need strong sisters who love their hijab, who can say it. And I'm not ashamed and not afraid of saying it. And even if I offend people, you know what? Your lack of modesty in your hijab offends me. I'm sorry.
You know, when it comes to the discussion of hijab, I think it's something, I'll tell you something. Many people think in the time of Sayyida Zahra alayhi salam, it was the norm that women covered their faces. It wasn't. It was the norm to, you know, be dressed in black and so on. It wasn't. We see in the athar in history that it wasn't actually the fashion. Actually, we see some reports where you think like, oh, it sounds like we're in the 20th century. You know, it's not how people think it is. So Zahra alayhi salam in reality was a trend setter. She set the trend. She's the one that came up with, you know, modesty is power and all of them things. Other than that, it was normal for a woman to somewhat cover her hair, somewhat put something over, you know, the chest area, neck area, and so on. But generally, this wasn't the case. As Zahra came, established that. And the Quran came and the Sunnah came and established that. And I think it's very, very important when discussing this matter that sisters understand, how do I say this without getting bullied for the next few days?
It's okay, speak it. I got your back. If I agree with it, I'll got your back. If I disagree, I'll tell them to, you know, go for it. Go for it, brother.
I think my AirPods the battery just finished this stuff.
Okay. You can still hear though?
Sorry?
You can still hear clearly?
I can hear you from the phone.
Okay. All right, good.
Yeah, so I think it's important that sisters understand that no matter what you do, the West still will want to push you for you to be like them. So in terms as in, you can wear, provocative clothing, but maybe cover your hair. They still don't want that. No, they want you to take off your hijab also. No, and then after that, oh, why are you so covered? No, take that as well. Then they're not going to accept you for who you are. So understand the importance of your hijab, understand the importance of following the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, and establish that in your life so that you're confident and, courageous in what you do, like you're saying, sister, because I think it's very important.
Absolutely. And what you said was very valid and neutral, brother. And I think part of building our confidence as Muslim women is having the support of our brothers validating this, because there's a lot of misconceptions in the West about hijab, that men are forcing us to wear the hijab. And so let's be clear about that. And this is my personal interpretation, and been wearing the hijab for a long time now, since I was 10 years old, and journeying it along the way, having different difficulties and attacks and growing with it, but also seeing my own daughter wearing the hijab this year for the first time and how beautiful that was. It's a choice. Okay, so it is a choice for us to follow this decree that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put in the Quran for us to do. Just like it's a choice for you to fast, it is a choice for you to pray, it is a choice for you to go to Hajj, in terms of choosing to do it, right? It is asked of us to do it in our religion, but then it is a choice if you want to do it or not. That's between you and God. Unfortunately, in our societies, in our communities, what do? Some of the men and families, including women, would force that onto their child, their young child, without teaching them what it is before. This is not how we develop our personality and character in terms of loving the hijab and wearing it. And for brothers, it would be different things as well, right? In terms of modesty and behavior. So what somebody's saying, fasting is not a choice. I will say it is a choice if you want to do it, right? So God has told us to do these, but it's your choice if you want to do it. So this is how I also talk about hijab. It is asked of us to do it in our religion, not by men, not by our fathers, not that. It's up to you to do it or not. So that's really important to do that. Somebody's asking, what's the topic? It's about personality development and I always forget the other word we had here. What was it? Personality building, rather, in hardships. And so we're talking specifically this example of courage and strength as an essential trait for young women to have in this society. So I think we've spoken a lot about that. So let's go on to the other questions, because I'm sure we can have a whole discussion just on that topic. So just to wrap it up quickly, sisters, go crazy with your makeup and your non-hijabi clothes in the appropriate areas. Absolutely, in parties and weddings, and we have these spaces for us to do that, right? But going publicly like that, with all due respect, you're defaming the modesty of the hijab. And you're hearing this from a sister, not just from the brother. And anyways, perhaps we can do another discussion on that one day. Well, I know that's what you're thinking it too. A lot of the brothers as well have had discussions with that. Of course, and it's so important that we have an open, honest discussion about this, because it's gone in another direction that is influencing our young sisters in a very negative way. And let's put hijab aside for a second. In terms of our specific topic today, it is also impacting the confidence of our young girls and our young men in our communities. When you have to be influenced in terms of your personality, in terms of influencers and our negative influences on you, that's not character development. That's not building your personality. That's following rather than learning and choosing to do something just because you want to fit in, just because you want to be cool, right? And this is something we all experience, whether we're in primary school, middle school, high school, college, university, even in our own centers, in our communities, our cliques. This is a normal part of development, right? And especially teenagers, right? How influenced do we get by people and things and trends all around us? What's cool to follow? The latest thing, you must get this. Now, I have to admit, I got on the bandwagon of these things, the AirPods, for my work, having to work from home and calling clients and even doing this. So I'm not following a trend. You can still do this kind of stuff if you have good reason to, for example, right? All right, so there was a few questions that we already missed here, and I'm just gonna go up and go back and get them. I think we already answered this question. Advice for face covering in the West and the possible difficulty that could arise. Sorry, I have to make a joke out of this. I think we can freely these days go around with our face coverings and not worry anymore. And I think after the corona pandemic is over, I think people are going to be looking at people who choose to cover their face in a different way. But it does come with conviction and courage. What are your thoughts on that, brother, while I get the other questions?
So the question was about hardships of having the face covering in the West, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I spoke about this the other day. I got some mostly good reaction and some bad reaction. Al-Hukm al-Awwal, so the first original ruling is that you should be following the hijab of Al-Zahra. The first ruling is for you to get to the hijab of Al-Zahra, which is face covering and so on. If you are in the West and you are living in a country where you have to fear for your life, or you can't specifically get everything because it's not wajib for you to do the face covering, but if there is a good enough reason for you not to do that, but your intention is for that, then you'll get the reward of the hijab of Al-Zahra. But if you don't do that and you kind of just about making it and your intention is not even to get to that level, then you're obviously not going to get the hasanat or the good deeds for it. So I say your environment is very important. The society you live in, the community you live in, how does it react towards you? For example, in the UK, it's completely fine. Yes, you're going to get looked at differently here and there, but there's hardships even if you're wearing the normal hijab. Okay,
Right.
So you need to look at your environment. If you're living, for example, I don't know, in a racist area and you wearing the face covering is going to, maybe where you're going to get physically harmed, then of course the Shara would say you'd have to do taqiyya. But the hukm al-awwal is that you follow Al-Zahra. You're trying to reach that level, which is the highest level. Some of us are, let's say Al-Zahra is at a level 10. Some of us are at level 1 or level 2 or level 3 or level 4. But at the end of the day, our intention is to get to the highest form of hijab. And inshallah, that answers the question. So it depends on the community you live in, inshallah.
Inshallah, yeah. So it's about choice and figuring if it's the right thing given your circumstances. So here's a question completely unrelated. Salam, is it true that an archaic ring and Durr al-Najaf keeps away bad energy?
I am not too well versed with the the topic of the stones and so on. But what I do know, two things. One, I will soon on my page start showing some of the hadith regarding it. I'll do a bit of research, inshallah. So keep a lookout.
Because some of them connect. The only reason why I asked this question, because otherwise it could be unrelated, is that some rings have energies related to attributes, whether it's lowering anger and whatnot.
Yeah. So the third thing is definitely every stone has its specific what it can affect and benefit you, but I don't know much about it, so I don't really want to comment.
Sounds good. So another question we've had here, let me see. So skipped quite a few questions here. Okay, some of these are not related, so I'm going to go to our list here. So another question says, how to maintain balance?
You're beautiful. No, it's just my friend, sorry.
Yeah, I figured. So question is how to maintain balance in life according to the teachings of the Ahl al-Bayt. So in relation to our topic here, what are your thoughts on that?
How to maintain balance in life according to the teachings of Ahl al-Bayt.
Alayhim as-salam, yeah.
We have a hadith, a beautiful hadith. Here I'm just narrating the khulasa of the kalam. So just the what I derive from the understanding. I'm not narrating it word by word. Imam al-Baqir says, basically, don't just live for the akhirah, live in this world also. Now, many of you are thinking, how is that possible? The imams constantly talk about, don't go, always talk about the hereafter, the hereafter, the hereafter. The imam is saying, be successful in this world. Be successful. Do good in this world. No one said to you, go sit in a cave and just read the Quran. That's not what the Imams are telling you. No, that's not what the Quran tells you. So to balance, the way to maintain balance within the teachings is have your day balanced out. So with our deen, alhamdulillah, trying to get going to work is ibadah. Spending time with your family is ibadah. Purifying your soul is ibadah. Seeking knowledge is ibadah. Sleeping of a mu'min, ibadah. Eating of a mu'min is ibadah.
Right.
Drinking water, ibadah. So it's all about balancing everything together. Now, honestly, with me, I'll give you a bit of an insight into my life. The most difficult thing, not that right now because of the lockdown, but before that, the most difficult thing was balancing everything together. Balancing family life, balancing work, balancing being a father, balancing being someone as a role model to people, balancing studying, everything like that. But you have to give everything its time. And when you give it its time, it's very important that you put all of your energy to it. There was a beautiful story narrated about Sayyid Khomeini. And it said, and I really enjoyed it. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's a good story. It says that his grandson one time was just sitting down, I think, maybe sitting on his bed doing nothing. And then, the Sayyid came and he saw him, and the grandson just jumped up and he was like, oh, sorry, I didn't mean that. And the Sayyid said to me, what do you mean? By the way, I'm not narrating it word by word, but so the Sayyid said to him, what do you mean? He said, oh, I'm not studying. The Sayyid said to him, right now, is it summer break for you? He said to him, yeah. He said, so enjoy your summer break. The Sayyid said to him, don't ever think. He said, when I'm sitting with my family, I'm going to give 100% to that time. When it's time to read, I will give it 100%. Nowadays, and I fall into this. I really, really do fall into this. My family always tell me this. I'm sitting down and I'm on my phone. And to be honest with you, I'm not just doing nothing on my phone. I'm answering people's questions. But I shouldn't really. I should just put my phone down and give my family its worth and the time. That's just the truth of it. So just be able to understand it. There's even a hadith by Imam Al Qadri where he talks about it. I'm sure you'll remember the hadith, sister.
I use it all the time when I talk about wellness and balance.
Please narrate it for us.
I'm paraphrasing here, but basically dividing your time in 4 parts. The first part to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the second to yourself. Notice how it says to yourself first, to yourself, your family, and work. So it's interesting to see the division right there of that. And so we have to figure out how to balance that in our lives as well. Yeah. And I think this in relation specifically to our topic here, personality building, this is part of discipline, right? This is part of motivation. And these are all aspects of our personality. If you can work on dividing your time in a healthy manner this way, and we struggle sometimes. And I find I personally have been struggling to find the time to sit and read Quran during my schedule because I work full time, even now during the quarantine. And if not, I've been actually busier now than I was before. So I personally been struggling finding that time with God in terms of specifically reading the Quran. So I make sure that I have it on, I listen to it while I'm doing other stuff. So there's different ways of how you can connect to God, let's say, different ways of having time with yourself, different things with your family, not just sitting in front of a TV, which is not really going to do much, but during this time to actually sit and do stuff together, cook together, play games together, right? I think a lot of families, and I've heard this from people now who say they've really gotten to know each other a lot more, subhanAllah.
Yeah, my
that
daughter
in
definitely.
Itself, yeah, you've noticed that too?
My daughter, before I used to be so busy. Of course, she knew I was her father. She's only about 1.5 years, right? But now she wants me sometimes. Like she would run towards me. She wants me to feed her. She wants me to be with her. She wants my attention. While before it was kind of like, oh, dad is there kind of thing, So it's important. This lockdown has been the biggest blessing of my life, honestly. I couldn't have asked for anything better. I've got so many
Subhanallah.
things done. I feel like I've been a bit unjust towards my family. I haven't spent too much time with the family. But I hope all the sacrifices that we do for the Ahlul Bayt is done for the right reasons. You know, sister,
Exactly.
I just
Yep.
want to, I think something that I think is very important is the foundations of how to structure a strong personality for times of hardship. Can
Yes.
we discuss that?
Absolutely. And I just want to give, sorry, before we delve into it,
No.
we get kicked out of Instagram after an hour. So as soon as we're kicked out, I'll go back in, but we're continuing on Facebook and
Inshallah.
YouTube.
Inshallah.
So go ahead. Yes.
So we all know al-Masa'ib, Zaynab alayhi salam. When she went through the death, she went through the death of her grandfather,
Right.
the death of her mother. And they were all very harsh type of deaths. They weren't, you know, just normal death and then you buried them with flowers. No, it was
No.
hard times that the Ahlul Bayt went through.
Right.
Her father, her grandfather, mother, father, brother, and then the event of the door. Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Can you just repeat the event of the?
I think it cut out.
Yeah, the last part, the event of the what?
So the it keeps on cutting out
Yep.
for some reason.
No, we can hear you. We heard everything up until the last part. The event of the?
Of Karbala, when she went through the event of
Ahsantum.
Karbala. Now, of course,
Correct,
even
yeah.
when she was going through the event of Karbala, she went through the aftermath of Karbala, not just Karbala. Now, how was she able to do this? A very crucial question. And I'm using Zaynab alayhi salam as an example because I do not see anyone from the Ahlul Bayt that went through what Zaynab went through. She's in a unique place. Zaynab alayhi salam, as-Sajjad, Abi Muhammad as-Sajjad alayhi salam, he says to Sayyida Zayn, he says, Auntie, by God, thank God, you are knowledgeable without being taught, and understanding and having understanding without explanation. So the Imam here gives us, the hadith here has 4 main points. 2 of them we don't need to discuss, 2 of them we do need to discuss. Why? He says, by God, you are knowledgeable. So now he's giving us knowledge. Jayyid. Then he says, without being taught. That we don't want to discuss because now we're going to get into theology. Is Sayyida Zaynab alayhi salam, does she have ilm al-ladunni, the divine knowledge or not? Another discussion. And understanding.
You got 2 minutes.
2 now. Okay, no problem. And then he says, and understanding. That's 2 now. Without explanation. Again, this without explanation, we're not going to discuss. That goes into theology. It gives us how to establish a personality like Zaynab. You need to have knowledge, understanding. So knowledge and hikmah, wisdom.
Right.
Because it's not just about having knowledge, it's about when to use that knowledge, how to portray that knowledge, how to display that knowledge. For example, she knew, Zaynab, you should not cry after the event of Karbala for a specific time frame. You know, we have a hadith where the Imam says to her, don't cry when I die. Now, many of our opponents have said, oh, no, see, he tells her, don't cry. Why are you crying, you Shia? No, this is for a specific time frame. She had to take on the role of being the ambassador of the Imam.
Exactly.
And I think it's one of them important aspects that is once you have found the foundation, knowledge and understanding. Where do we understand? Where do we take knowledge from? We take it from the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt. When you refer back to the books like Basair al-Darajat, Kitab al-Mahasin, Kitab al-Kafi al-Sharif, Usul al-Kafi, you'd see what? The Imams are always talking about attributes, different attributes of a mu'min. Courage, shyness, when to be shy, when not to be shy. Arrogant, when to be arrogant, when not to be arrogant.
Exactly.
Being, for example, when to be harsh, when not to be harsh. when to be merciful and not to be merciful. This
Right.
all requires knowledge and for you to refer back to the complete human beings. Muhammad and Ali
Exactly.
Muhammad alayhim as-salam.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And so we just got cut off there. That's okay. We're going to go right back in. And I think it's such a beautiful point to discuss. Absolutely. So I'll just wait till the Instagram comes back in. All right. So I'm in. I'll just wait for people to come back in there. So I'm up on Instagram. You can just join in there. That was a perfect point to end right there, and can continue. There we go.
I ended it right on the
timer. Yeah, ahsantum. That's such a powerful point you bring up in terms of the one person that we see, and a female, a woman. Sorry, I always have to put in that aspect in there. From the family of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who embodied holding in that being so courageous the face. Yes.
Can I just add something? Sorry to interrupt you, sister.
Please, no, go ahead, please.
You know, when you said you kind of highlighted that it's a female. Right. I'm glad you did that. You know why?
Thank you.
We live in an era where feminism is on a rise. You know, when they come to Muslims, you're thinking, what do you mean women are oppressed? I'm a slave of a woman called Zeynep, a woman called Zahra, Khadija. I'm a slave to a woman called Sayyida Hakima. I'm a slave to a woman called al-Usud, the sister of Zurara bin A'yan and his brothers. We are embedded to these women. Women in our religion are at the forefront. Without them, none of our aqidah, our athar, our heritage would have got to us. For example, you see al-Usud that I spoke about. Sorry, sister, I interrupted you.
Not at all. Before you do that, can you look at both the laptop and the Instagram? Because people are saying you're not looking at them on Facebook and YouTube.
Sorry,
so bring your phone closer to the laptop camera, so that way both audiences get to hear what you're saying. And please do continue with that point. It's interesting. While you're doing that, I'll just quickly say it is interesting how the rise. Don't show that there. Yeah, how there is this wave of feminism, and especially in Islam, how our Muslim sisters have taken on and been influenced by this wave of feminism, forgetting who we come from and where we come from and who our own role models are. We forget that. The issue here is not who we have as role models, brother. Let's be realistic, and especially how it impacts our personalities. It's also let me say it delicately, the jahiliyyah aspect that is still impacting the men in our community, where they are not following the true Islam in terms of treatment of women. So we hear.
I'm laughing because you shot the gun for me. I didn't need to shoot.
Sorry. Go for it. You continue. Go ahead. Continue.
Sister, please. You were saying something.
That was my point. You can continue now, because there's a difference with people saying I am the slave of these great women. But I have to say this. These same men who come and beat their chest for Fatima al-Zahra, these same men use their hands when they come home from majalis, beating their chest, beat their women and children. And they say they are a slave to Fatima al-Zahra.
They have no respect.
It's no more than عيب عليهم. But there's a lot here to unpack. There is the aspect of men saying we are the slave of these women who have protected and preserved Islam from Sayyida Zeynep on. However, they do not follow how the imams portrayed how to treat your women. And then so you have a disconnect here and a disparity, a complete polarity, opposites of what our faith teaches us and how the men and women, by the way, because women also don't respect men sometimes and abuse them as well, and who are a complete contradiction to what we're saying here, right?
I totally agree. Wallah, totally agree. Many of the men that think you can cry for Sayyida Zahra and then go home and beat your wife, who is the daughter of Sayyidah Zahra, then know that you have no place for Sayyidah Zahra alayhi salam in any shape or form in Yawm al-Qiyamah. Continuing to our discussion, our aqidah, our athar, one of the biggest narrators is a companion of Imam al-Baqir and Imam al-Sadiq. His name is Zurara bin A'yan. He has so many brothers. Abdul Rahman. He has Humran, who's actually one of the narrators of the Quran. And he has so many of them, so many brothers. They all converted because of their sister.
Subhanallah.
And if it wasn't for her converting them, then know that these books that you see here, most of them would have not come to us. And that a woman played such a role in Tashayyu that you couldn't believe it, honestly. But when going back to say the Zaynab alayhi salam, so the two aspects of knowledge and understanding, I always say, brothers, go to volume 2, brothers and sisters, sorry, go to volume 2. I'll look at the screen now. Volume 2 of Al-Kafi Sharif. It talks about the attributes of a mu'min. Then at the end of the chapter, it talks about how to socialize. This is so important in our generation because sometimes some people are shy, and being shy is a very good thing. Being shy is something wanted from our imams. But having said that, that doesn't mean to shy away and not tell the truth. So there's a balance of things. It's all about the balance of having these attributes. For example, hating is an attribute of a mu'min, but there's a balance where you can go to the extreme. That's why you need to balance it with the other thing, love, for example. And so I'll definitely say refer back to books like Al-Kafi Sharif, and so that you understand when it's meant that Zaynab was knowledgeable without being taught and had understanding without explanation, so that we are a reflection of Zaynab, a reflection of the complete human beings, Muhammad and Ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. So let's get to answering some of these questions that were sent to us, although I do believe what we're saying has a huge influence on developing our character and our personality, especially in hardships. And these questions reflect that and say how to shatter our ego, because ego is it's a big term, I think, both from an Islamic perspective as well as from a psychological perspective. What are your thoughts on that?
We have a hadith attributed to Amir al-Mu'mineen, and I always mention this hadith. I always talk about this hadith, and I say the Imam says, Rahimallahu imra'in arafa qadra nafsah. May Allah have mercy on the individual that knows his status, knows his rank. What does that give us?
Yeah.
It allows us to understand that you need to know yourself, what position you're in, what rank you're in, and what status you're in. For me, I'll be honest with you. You know, when you're younger, you're about 18, you start to pick up Al-Kafi Sharif, you have a little understanding of the different chains of hadith, and, you know, you start to think you're a bit of a scholar. And, you know, I actually thought I started to think that I was, you know, something special. My ego was getting the better of me. Like, oh no, this scholar doesn't know anything. This person doesn't know anything. But then when I went to meet the different scholars and you sit down with them, you start to understand that know your place, know who you are, know what you know, and believe me, it will destroy your ego. And the second most important thing, sorry sister, is that for you to have a ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Once you have this ma'rifah of Allah, how are you going to have any ego? You are the limited and He is the unlimited. And it shows you, and once you start to have that relationship, you start to humble yourself before Allah and before the creatures of Allah. So I definitely say, know yourself, know your rank, and also increase your ma'rif of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to kind of destroy your ego.
And this goes in line with a lot of theories that I came across when researching Islamic psychology and counseling theories and practice. And I came across this theory of how to change behavior, and it's based on the nafs, right? And this is by Imam Ghazali, and it's Al-Kashani explored this idea further in his book. I haven't fully read it there, but I've taken bits and pieces.
Or
I didn't hear you, sorry?
did you mean Faith al-Kashani or another Kashani?
I think it's that one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, now by the way, he has a really good book. Inshallah, I'll send it to you, sister.
Inshallah.
You can, order it for yourself. But Fadl, sorry, I interrupted.
No, I need to know the resource. I'm not remembering fasting still here. But this was attributing to talking about the three parts of the nafs. So the lawama, al-mutma'inna, and I always forget the last one. Mutma'inna, lawama, and the... it slipped my mind too. Somebody help us out. Remember the third one? In any case, so the battling the three parts of the self, right? Working with the different states of the self to develop, it'll come to us in a second, to work on the ego part. And so psychology is interesting with that because Freud, who talks about psychoanalysis, and maybe he's not as popular, but he was amongst the first to talk about psychology and put it into theories. And so he talked about the ego and its different parts. And I found it was so similar to the three parts that we have from an Islamic perspective. So he talked about the id, the ego, and the super-ego. Al-amara, thank you. Nafs al-amara. Al-mutma'inna, and what was the other one? See, I forgot that now.
Shaykhna Azizna, thank you.
Al-amara, wal-mutma'inna, and the lawama. There we go.
Yeah.
So these three states of the nafs that's described in the Quran, subhanallah, you find it in modern psychology, and they talk about it in the different parts, and so similar as well. And I find this also can help us work through the ego as well, in terms of what does it mean to know yourself. And I know there's tons of books and hadith and riwayat in terms of how to purify the self, but it's also in psychology we work around that as well, in terms of understanding the different parts of yourselves and learning how to manage anger, how to be patient. And so this model by Imam Ghazali talks about that, is setting up a shart with yourself, right? A contract with yourself, a condition, and then working on it to get to that place where you can beat your ego or accomplish whatever goal that you were working on. So in this case, you want to work on your ego. And so you can work on developing those different parts by setting a condition, working on it, observing yourself, muraqabat an-nafs, right? And then getting to the part where, let's say you didn't accomplish your goal, is al-mu'aqaba. I don't like using the word mu'aqaba because it's a harsh negative. You want positive reinforcement. So perhaps instead of consequence, you could say, redoing it again.
Can I comment?
Please.
I humbly disagree with you. I think it's important for both things. Yeah, I think it's important to. I get what you're saying in terms as in, sometimes because people are, a lot of people are in the beginning stages, maybe it's a bit too harsh to kind of swallow. I get that. But I think it's important to know that, no, there is consequences. Be careful. Just like
No, consequences. No, that's one thing. A condition, a consequence that you must do something in order to make up for it. Absolutely. Because when you're first starting out, you don't, for example, simple is you don't want to eat as much chocolate. You know what? Let's work a condition around that with consequences of no chocolate in the house for 1 week. I know I'm using a silly example here, but I'm just changing the word consequence sometimes because it can be very harsh in terms of punishment. The punishment part, not necessarily the consequence, but the punishment part can be harsh to use. Instead of saying punishment, perhaps is to change that up in terms of starting over again. Maybe taking away something. So we want to use positive reinforcement to encourage and motivate people to work on whatever aspect that they're trying to work on. This again requires a whole other discussion on its own. I'm just throwing in little tidbits of things that I found interesting in terms of when we want to really strengthen ourselves and work on, let's say we have a bad habit that we want to change. This is a great model to use. And if you just look it up, Imam Ghazali, his 6 steps for behavior change, it's a beautiful model that I believe that can work. And I use this with my Muslim clients or people of faith and who are really interested in using these types of models, we go through it. I'll print out the model and we'll go through it. And it's great in psychology in terms of modifying or changing a behavior. And I find it's also perhaps something good to do when we want to apply it to building our personalities in terms of changing thought patterns that are negative, changing habits, or part of our characters that are perhaps things that we want to work on, especially anger. So anger could be put into this formula here, and working on how are you going to observe yourself, how are you going to do, what are you going to do in terms of the muraqaba, right? Observing and behaving, but also in the end, in terms of a consequence for you. If let's say you've succeeded in holding down your anger or managing your anger, what is a reward that you're going to have? If you haven't, what is the consequence here? And so instead of punishment, consequence. What is the consequence if you have lost your temper? What are you going to do? So these just ideas here to play around with in terms of how to systematically work, because we can talk about these things, but if we don't have step-by-step procedures and techniques and coping strategies, then we're really not doing anything. We're just saying words that are nice to hear. But if you're not going to act upon it, because that's what's required of us. And I learned this also in the course that I was taking in terms of how are you going to do tazkiyat an-nafs? It's not just by talk, it's by doing good deeds. It's by doing good actions, whether it's to yourself or to others. And the more, and I learned this recently with my daughter reading Surah Al-Layl, and in her children's Quran book and the interpretation of it, such a simple drawing and such a simple interpretation, but it hit me hard, where it said that when you do good to others, or when you do good, Allah makes it easy for you to do more good. And this is a great feeling all around. And if you don't do good, give charity, for example, or help others, then it becomes more of a hardship to do good. So it stops you, right? So this is interesting that action here can truly help us working on parts of ourselves that we don't like or that we know we need to improve on. This in itself will help us build our character, and especially when dealing with difficult situations. What are your thoughts on that, brother?
I think the we forget, our lives are so busy, we forget to concentrate on how important it is to develop yourself, and to actually research into how to develop yourself, how to develop your thinking, your habits, your bad habits, your good habits, how to evolve as a human being. Most of us just live that lifestyle of work, come home, relax a bit, back to work, maybe Saturday, Sunday, just relax a bit, and then you're doing it again. But I see no quality of life there. It's just basically repeat. And I think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to do more than that. It's for us to prepare ourselves for more than that. And we have a hadith that states a mu'min will always be examined every 40 days. Sometimes when nothing hard has come my way, I always think, oh, it's coming next week. I try to calculate in my head, when was the last time something, hardship hits me? And you kind of prepare for them hard times. So definitely what you're saying is important. And I definitely have learned a lot.
And bless you. And it's so interesting to hear it from the Islamic perspective, what we see in psychology, because this specific theory, it goes hand in hand with what the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam have taught us, and what we know in the Quran when it talks about the three aspects of the self, right? So it's really nice to see that it does go hand in hand and not at odds. Mind you, there's obviously a lot of things that in modern psychology is against our beliefs, but we're taking the things that go hand in hand. I think that's for another discussion. I was actually going to ask you. I don't honestly at the top of my head right now, but let's see if I could think of something. I'm at a blank right now. Sorry.
No problem. No.
But that's definitely something worth thinking. And so we have to be careful sometimes, because I have been approached by people who say, how do you deal with ABC situation that goes against our faith? I'll just say it straight up. I just remember something right now, like homosexuality, for example. How do you approach this topic where, it's talking about inclusivity and diversity in modern psychology in terms of wellness and helping people. But we know, for example, from a faith-based perspective, specifically Islam and other monotheistic religions, they have different views on that. So how does this go hand in hand with that? And so this is something that's a very delicate and sensitive topic, and I don't want to delve too deep into it. But the crux here of it is, when you are supporting somebody, a client who comes in with an issue, you're not there to impose your faith and your beliefs. You're there supporting them with something that they're struggling with, right? And we know from the Islamic perspective, it's anything but homophobic. It's, you choose how you live according to the religion, of course, but again, it's very delicate. And I've had clients who've had to deal with that, and they've come in and say, this is how I feel, this is how I'm living. And some people are saying, I don't want to feel this way. And I remember years ago, before this topic came out into the open the way that it has now, even in our Muslim communities, I had clients who were struggling with that and quietly, and it was still new for me too, in terms of how do we cope with it. And I remember speaking with a sheikh at the time who advised me this and said, and this is what the rhetoric is now that I'm hearing with all the alimas and the alims who are addressing this, especially publicly and within our communities, is that it's one thing to have the thought, it's another to act upon it. And so that I found at the time, the client really found peace in that, because they were struggling with that, right? And for them, they thought, because we live in a world, in this part of the world, where it's very encouraged to be yourself, whoever you are, out in the open. So this was something part of this person's personality they were struggling with, right? And so when it was addressed in this delicate matter from the advice of the sheikh, I found this client found peace within themselves, that they felt, and I've had this from, by the way, from non-Muslim clients as well, who have said, and then I had a Christian client once tell me, I feel like I'm going to hell because I'm this way. And he felt that he was doomed for that. And it was interesting having that discussion with him. And he later on found religious support to help him work through that. And it was the same thing of what we heard from the language used with the chefs. It's one thing to have the thought, it's another to act upon it. And that was very helpful for that person as well, who felt that they were doomed to be in hell because they had these thoughts.
I think the Muslim community, so as a whole, definitely need to start to looking at the mental health of homosexuality and how to approach it. Because let's be honest, back in, I know definitely in Iraq and so on, the approach is kind of, as they like to say,
it's harsh.
Yeah, very savage, and I think it's not. They need to understand that, people feel like this is how they're born. Some people, have that inclination. We need to be able to tackle it in the correct way. And I think the ulama need to start to kind of maybe look into that area and delve more deeper into this area.
In a way, just quickly, brother, in a way that doesn't push people away.
Yes,
because it's a very delicate issue, and it's still new for us to discuss it openly. So we have to be aware of the language. We also have to be aware of the repercussions, right? We don't want to push people away. We don't want to be homophobic, but at the same time, we also have our beliefs, right? So it's a delicate balance, and it's great that you're saying that, our scholars need to look into this more, because there is a lot of behavior that has pushed people away, and we want to be able to bring people back and have open discussions about this, and show love and support and compassion. But it doesn't mean, and this is another thing, aside from this specific topic, just mental health in general, right? When we have a non-judgmental attitude in terms of supporting and compassion to people, you're more likely to bring them in when you show that support and active listening, rather than being the haram police and judging. That's going to push people away. Sorry.
I actually wanted to say something about that, as you were saying. I think definitely the religious community, they have become judgmental. They have that attitude, I'm better than you, I don't know, because you're a bit close, I don't know, because you're apparently closer to God or something like that. But then there is also that other balance of, I always say as a joke, I am the haram police.
Okay.
Whatever my friends do, for example, I always message them straight away, and I'm like, don't do that, delete it now. Things like that. But at the same time, I do agree with that. There is an approach to how you should do it. So there is the correct approach, but then there should be the correct reaction. Some people
And
react
it's
in
different
a
with your
really bad
friends
way.
also. It's also different when you have the familiarity and comfort with your friends, then you could say that. But definitely somebody who comes to you and asks you a question, and you don't know them, they don't know you. We can't play the haram police right away, but we definitely do that with
I
our
know, you
friends.
definitely can't. No.
I do that. I do that too with my friends too. Sometimes they'll see something like, what is that? Why'd you post that? Or why'd you say that and do that? And I get called out too. Some of my close friends do that, and I know where it's coming from. It's coming from a place of love and support rather than harsh criticism and judgment, right? So it truly depends. You know, there's another topic that perhaps that we can explore in the future, and it's to take a look at, we kind of touched on it in terms of judgment, but perhaps looking at it deeper in terms of slander, harassment, and abuse, bullying, that topic, that, and perhaps that's something we can explore in the future. But I find that really impacts a lot of young people as well, including older people in our communities, especially when there's a lot of that on social media, bullying and harassment and slander, but also within our own communities that happens against people. And that is a concern, because I see how that has pushed people to the brink of them feeling very depressed and very lonely and isolated. And it's really sad to see that this is still happening within our community, a lot of that. And we've seen in the past how it has pushed people to the point of taking their lives, unfortunately, right? And that person feels that the whole world is turned against them. I wouldn't necessarily call it a weakness in character, because a lot of these people deal with serious clinical depression where they need the love and support and treatment and medication to get them back up again. And we've seen that with people in our community. So perhaps that's a topic we can explore in the future.
You reminded me of a story. Sister Zahra Al-Alawi, years ago, I remember. She put a beautiful email of a sister that was telling her story. And that story changed the way I react to kind of when a mistake is done by, a young person, forever, honestly. Whenever I remember Sister Zahra Al-Alawi, I always remember the story. Basically, the sister was saying she was a young teenager. She was going to school. I think she was one of the only hijabis or something along them lines. This was years ago, so forgive my memory. And, slowly got with the wrong crowd, started to take off her hijab in school, started to get involved with, boys, things like that. Started to have a boyfriend slowly. And then, she did the big mistake. And then she says, her parents found out, her whole community excommunicated her. Everyone disowned her. I think, maybe, I don't know if my memory serves me right. I don't know where she had to go and live. Everyone, now, alhamdulillah, I remember the email for sure, she, came back to Allah and she repented and so on. And it just shows that reaction is so wrong.
Right.
I remember
pushes people away. Yeah,
like I remember like certain sins as a kid, I never used to look at it like with seriousness. I just think, oh, your parents tell you, oh, Allah will get angry. It's like, yeah, okay,
that's a scary image of God.
And it's just that reaction. And I remember she was saying I was left with no one. Like, I didn't even know why I did the mistake. And it just shows that as a community, the way that we approach, people doing mistakes, people sinning or doing these big sins, we should approach them in a certain way. Maybe they can repent. Deen is all about rahmah and repenting. So yeah, it just reminded me of that story and how important a community and their reaction is. It's so important. It's so important, it's unbelievable. So yeah, inshallah.
Absolutely. Inshallah, it could encourage us more and more in the greater community to have more compassion when people are struggling or making mistakes and errors and things like that, not to be so judgmental. We don't know what's happening behind that. And you see a lot of people who engage in this type of addictive behavior is perhaps they're trying to drown out the pain that they're experiencing, right? And so they turn to this type of behavior to lose themselves and to try and forget or just hinder and cover and dismiss the pain of what's happening. It could be abuse that they're experiencing, right? It could be sexual assault or abuse. It could be any other type of situation
not,
that's happening.
not even just that, sister. Like, you as parents, if your daughter or your son did a big sin and it's put you to shame, maybe you're the mistake. Maybe it's not your children. Maybe you did something wrong. Maybe why don't you look at yourself in the mirror? And this is so important. And our community is so quick to point fingers, yet none of them point their fingers at themselves. None of them look at themselves of when they was younger, what they did wrong.
Forget
how
that,
they
absolutely.
Wrong.
Absolutely, forget that. You know, another topic in relation to this discussion, like we were saying, the slander, and you hear a lot of that against women in the community, like you were saying. And sometimes I've seen this happen because of, let's say, revenge, because people want to take revenge on somebody because they've been rejected, so they want to attack and slander this person. And this is pretty common, but then it's next level when people do it at a public level or send messages and threatening phone calls against people. I've heard of things like that happening within our communities, and it's so sad because that person has not deserved this type of behavior. And yet how does this impact somebody's well-being and their overall development, their personality development as well? Because this type of bullying can really hurt a lot of young people, right? So again, this could be perhaps a topic of discussion next time, inshallah. And I think we've gone through most of our questions, and we veered off in other places, but I think it all comes back to how do we work on those, or what are the traits that we want to work on in times of hardship? We looked at courage. We looked at self-esteem and confidence. We looked also at patience, right? When to be patient and when not to be patient, and when to stand up for yourself, and when to do the right thing for yourself, for others as well. And how to, we also looked at some different theories and strategies in terms of how to be able to do that, whether it's how to manage anger or work on that part of the nafs, because the nafs is always in that influx. It's never in a state of one place. It's always dynamic, right? So it's a very interesting discussion we had today. I learned a lot from you as well, brother. Thank you so much for the time. And I just wanted to give a shout out to our designer who made the poster, who approached and said and offered to do these posters, mashallah. And I love that in our community how we support each other. And so if anybody needs any digital designs or any of that type of work, please do go to Bronze Digitals. Thank you so much. And so if you have any other ideas for topics that perhaps the brother and I can discuss, or you have other mental health, religious type of topics that you want to discuss, please message either one of us. And if you have any specific questions, because I did notice a few were asked, I not that I ignored them, but I did say we will answer questions that were related specifically to our topic. So please do contact the brother. Brother, do you want to give your contact info so people can get a hold of you?
Yeah, on Instagram, it's The Purified Truth. On Twitter, it's Purified Truth. On Snapchat, it's Purified Truth. And I do have a YouTube channel with some scholars also called The Purified Truth.
So very easy. The Purified Truth. You just look that up, inshallah.
So either The Purified Truth or Purified Truth.
Inshallah.
But just before we go, I think, you know, I think the community need to be grateful for you, sister, for all your work and all of the help that you give to the community. And your approach to how to deal with mental health in our community that's, you know, to some degree maybe still a bit backdated in that area. So definitely keep your head up, continue working hard, and we appreciate you. I appreciate you. And inshallah, all the best, and maybe we can do this another time, inshallah.
Inshallah. Julian, thank you so much for your support, brother. And that's I think we've gone this far in our mental health awareness within our communities because of the support of people like your respected self and other people who see how important it is, and how we want to bring in people, not let them suffer alone. Because if anything, our faith is about peace and finding that peace and that compassion and that rahmah, which is exemplified by the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Inshallah, we can all work together to help our people in our communities in whatever capacity that and skills that Allah has blessed us with, to help each other, inshallah, and grow together, inshallah. Thank you again, brother. Bless you for your time. Taqabbal Allah a'malkum, inshallah. Please remember all of us. And also, please, special du'as for all of those people who are struggling during this pandemic, whether emotionally, mentally, or even physically, and for all of those people who are struggling with the loss of family members and loved ones during this time as well. So thank you very much again, brother. Ma'jurin, inshallah.
Jazakumullah khair. See you
Inshallah,
soon.
until next time. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.